She hated her daughter so much because she believed she was the reason her only son died. She said she was the reason she could no longer have the son she had always longed for. Maria was married to Kennedy, a calm and gentle man whose love for her was steady and unfailing. Unlike other men, he never demanded, never raised his voice, never treated her as less. He adored their two daughters. Kosy, their first child, was a mirror image of Maria herself, smart, respectful, and always eager to help. Ava was born 3 years later, cheerful, lively, and playful. But Maria's joy was never complete. When Ava arrived, Maria forced a smile, masking the ache that gnawed at her chest. She had expected a boy. She needed a boy to secure her place among women, to complete her womanhood. By the time she became pregnant with the third child, Maria's prayers turned desperate. She fasted silently, making a secret pact with God. When the nurse finally placed a tiny bundle in her arms, it was another girl. Her face collapsed, unable to hide her disappointment. Kennedy, with joy radiating from his smile, held the baby with pride, rocking her gently as if she was the only precious jewel in the world. But Maria's heart was hollow, heavy, and bitter. Maria was a member of an exclusive women's club called the Glorious Mothers Association. It was a support circle of accomplished and proud women, wives, mothers, professionals. Most of them had sons and daughters, and some, like the elegant Ajok, boasted of 5 boys. They all bragged about their sons, their intelligence, their protection, and potential. Maria listened quietly, smiled politely, and clapped, but deep within, their words spread like thorns. She envied them all and felt left out. If only God had given me 3 boys instead of 3 girls, I would be the happiest woman on earth, she would often whisper to herself. She envied not only her fellow club members, but even strangers walking down the street with baby boys on their backs. Her eyes would look on the chubby legs dangling from the wrappers, and her world twist. A son, that was all she asked for. That was what she believed would make her a complete woman. Not just a mother, but a real mother. One Saturday morning during their usual club meeting, their chairlady, Madame Loretta, stood in the middle of the decorated hall, her laughter booming as she told how her son poured palm oil into their washing machine, saying he wanted to cook the clothes. The room erupted in laughter. Some women nearly fell off their seats. Others clapped until their palms were sore, adding their own stories of their son's mischiefs. Maria sat among them, stiff as stone. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her heart boiled with rage. Every laugh felt like a dagger. She felt mocked, alienated, and invisible. Even though some of the women shared stories about their daughters, she didn't care. She filtered every word and was fixed on the fact they had sons, while she didn't. Their laughter echoed in her ears like judgment, but she didn't say a word. She never let anyone see her pain. Her closest friend, Joyce, noticed the darkness in her eyes. She knew Maria's hunger for a male child and tried to talk to her after the meeting was over. It doesn't matter whether you have boys or girls. What matters is that they are healthy. But Maria's voice cut her off, sharp like a knife. That's easy for you to say. You will never understand because you have 3 sons. Her husband Kennedy never complained. He loved their daughters and treated them like treasures, but Maria's heart cried for something else. When Oma turned 2, Maria baked a crown-shaped cake, but her mind wasn't in the celebration. She had waited long enough, and tonight would be the night. That night, after the last guest left and the house sank into silence, Maria slipped into their bedroom like a woman on mission. She was determined to conceive a boy that night. By the next morning, Maria lay still in bed, a satisfied smile on her face. She stretched and whispered, "It is done." She had targeted her fertile period like a soldier on a battlefield, and all she was supposed to do was wait. Weeks later, her body confirmed what her heart already knew. The nausea, the exhaustion, the missed period, all signs pointed to pregnancy. By the time she held the test results that said she was pregnant, her joy was uncontainable. "It is a boy," she declared to Kennedy, rubbing her belly with reverence. Kennedy chuckled softly, drawing her into his arms. "Sweetheart, it's too early to know the baby's gender. Don't rush." But Maria was unshaken. She was sure of what was inside her. She even announced to few of her club members with pride that she was carrying a baby boy. Joyce, worried, urged her to be cautious and not to be sure until scan confirms. But Maria insisted she was sure. Until months later, when she laid on the hospital bed, staring at the ultrasound screen, shocked by what the doctor said. She was carrying a baby girl. Maria froze. Another girl? Her mind went blank as the doctor's words echoed like a chorus in her head. She blinked rapidly at the ultrasound screen, hoping she had misheard, hoping it was a mistake, but it wasn't. Kennedy, with his usual warm smile, leaned over to her, but Maria stiffened. She pushed his arms away and stood up, walking straight out of the room without a single word. At home, Kennedy stood still, confused by his wife's cold reaction. He approached her gently, his voice soft. "Maria, what's wrong? Why are you acting this way?" Before he could finish, Maria broke down in tears. "I don't want another girl, Kennedy. I need a male child, not this." Kennedy, shocked and confused, tried to console her, reminding her that children were gifts from God, but his words fell on deaf ears. Maria's heart was broken. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. What will my club members say? They will laugh at me. They will mock me. Another girl? The shame will kill me. A dark thought crept into her mind, ending the pregnancy. If she lost the baby, maybe she and Kennedy could try again. Maybe next time it would be a boy. But the thought of Kennedy finding out held her back. That would definitely ruin her marriage, so she buried the thought. But her pregnancy became heavy with bitterness. Her mood swings were worse than ever. Sharp anger one moment, crushing sadness the next. She barely smiled, not just because of pregnancy hormones, but because of anger and despair. Kennedy noticed and did everything possible to cheer her up, bringing flowers, surprising her with gifts, even singing to her like he had done when they first fell in love, but nothing worked. Maria had become distant. She stopped caring, stopped her hospital appointments on purpose, ignoring calls and reminders. Deep down, she hoped something would go wrong. She hated herself for thinking that way, but her pain was stronger than her guilt. Her doctor called one day, asking her why she hadn't come to the hospital, that she was putting her life and that of the baby in danger. Maria froze. She hadn't realized that her neglect could kill her too. For the first time, fear gripped her heart. From that day on, she began attending appointments, not for the baby's sake, but for herself. Yet, deep within, she still clung to a hopeless wish that miracle might change the gender, but the miracle she prayed for never came. She gave birth to another girl. Her heart was heavy with rage and disappointment. But despite her bitterness, she cared for her daughters like any mother should. Yet every night, when the house fell silent, she lay on her bed crying quietly. One day, while shopping at a mall, she saw a young woman pushing a stroller with triplets. The mother looked exhausted, her eyes droopy from sleepless nights. But Maria didn't see her struggle. She saw blessings. 3 chubby baby boys was all she saw. Her heart twisted with envy. That was the kind of exhaustion she wanted. That was the life she longed for. Her youngest daughter, Marvella, was barely a year old, but Maria's desire burned stronger than reason. That night, she tried to have her way with Kennedy, refusing protection. Kennedy frowned, reminding her they had agreed on having just 4 children, but Maria insisted. 5 months later, Maria was back in the hospital bed, clutching Kennedy's hand tightly, her eyes glued to the ultrasound screen. She prayed silently, every fiber of her being begging heaven for good news. The doctor turned smiling. "Congratulations, Mrs. Kennedy. You're carrying a baby boy." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Maria screamed with joy, tears streaming down her cheeks. She clasped her hands together, thanking God for everything. Kennedy beamed beside her, though his excitement was calmer. To him, the gender never mattered, but seeing Maria so happy melted his heart. From that day, Maria glowed. She bragged proudly at her club meetings, lifting her chin higher than ever. She never missed any doctor's appointment. She followed every instruction carefully, and even decorated a special room painted in shades of blue, filling it with toys and clothes fit for her long-awaited son. One evening, Maria sat in the living room with her daughters, watching a TV show. Marvella crawled around the floor giggling. Kennedy wasn't home yet. Suddenly, Maria felt thirsty and asked Kosy to get her a glass of water. Kosy hurried into the kitchen, eager to please her mother. She opened the fridge and took out a cold bottle of water. As she stretched her hand to the cabinet to get a glass, her elbow accidentally knocked down a container of vegetable oil. It fell with a loud crash and spilled all over the floor. From the living room, Maria heard the crash. Panic shot through her. She rushed to the kitchen. But the moment her foot touched the sleek, oily floor, her legs flew out from under her. She screamed as her body slammed against the tiles. The sound echoed through the house. Kosy stood trembling, confused by the sight in front of her. Maria lay gasping, clutching her swollen belly. The one thing she had prayed for, her son, was suddenly in danger. Kosy stood frozen in shock, tears streaming down her face. Her small hands trembled as she knelt beside her mother, who lay on the cold tiles. Blood trickled steadily between Maria's legs, mixing with the slippery pool of oil on the floor. Kosy tried to help her mother up, but Maria only groaned in pain, her eyes half shut, her breathing uneven. There was no adult in the house. No neighbor had heard. Kosy's panic rose like storm. She ran to the living room, grabbed her mother's phone, and dialed her father's number, but his line was unavailable. She tried over and over again, still nothing. Her small hands shook so hard that the phone nearly slipped from her grip. She ran back to the kitchen. Her mother's eyes were half closed now, her body limp, her breathing shallow. She dropped to her knees beside her, crying uncontrollably. She didn't know what else to do. Minutes felt like hours until the front door clicked open. Kennedy stepped in and glanced at his daughters, who sat quietly in the living room, their eyes glued to the TV as if nothing unusual was happening. He frowned and wondered where Maria and Kosy was. Then a faint groan reached his ears. His heart skipped. He dashed into the kitchen and froze. Maria was on the floor, oil slicking the tiles, blood soaking her dress, and Kosy sat beside her, helplessly. He didn't stop to ask questions. He bent down quickly, scooped his wife into his arms and carried her outside. He tucked Maria carefully in the back seat of his car and sped off. The drive to the hospital was only a few minutes, but every second felt like a lifetime to Kennedy. That night, the hospital reeked of antiseptic and fear. Kennedy paced the hallway, his hands trembling. At last, the doctor called him into his office. The silence in the room was heavy. The doctor cleared his throat and finally spoke. "We tried to save both your wife and son, but," he paused, "we could only save your wife. We lost your son." Kennedy's heart sank like a stone in water. He knew how much Maria had longed for a son. He knew the joy she had felt when she found out she was carrying one. But the doctor wasn't done. His next words shattered him completely. "I'm sorry to say this, but the damage to your wife's womb was severe. We had no choice but to remove it. She lost her womb." Kennedy sat motionless, numb. His wife had been so full of joy, finally carrying a son. Not only was the boy gone, but her dream of ever having one was gone forever. How was he going to tell her this? When Maria regained consciousness and learned the truth, her scream filled the hospital room. She clutched her chest, wailing bitterly. The recovery was no recovery at all. Each night, she wept until her chest ached, until she was too weak to continue. Kennedy tried everything. Words of comfort, prayers, promises, but nothing could calm her. When they finally returned home, Maria was no longer the same woman. Her laughter had vanished. Her warmth disappeared. She moved through the house like a ghost, cold and distant. But the one person who noticed the most was Kosy. Her mother's eyes, once full of love, now burned with hate whenever they landed on her. To Maria, Kosy was the reason she lost everything. If she hadn't spilled that oil, if she had just been careful, I would still be pregnant. My son would still be alive. My womb will still exist, Maria whispered one evening, her voice shaking with venom. From that day on, her cruelty grew. She began calling Kosy names: bad luck, witch, enemy of progress. When Kennedy was at home, Maria hid her rage, acting cold but silent. But when he left for work, the house turned into a battlefield. She beat Kosy with broomsticks, belts, or anything her hands could find. She forced her to scrub the floors, sweep every corner of the house, wash piles of clothes. Sometimes she refused to let her go to school, loading her with chores instead and denying her food and rest. At just 10 years old, Kosy became a servant in her own home. "You destroyed my life. You killed my son. You ruined everything," Maria would scream as she struck Kosy. Kosy cried every night, hiding her face in pillow, her small heart filled with fear. She began to wonder if Maria was truly her mother. Every day was torture from her mother, and she always threatened to do worse if she ever mentioned anything to her father. Meanwhile, Maria chased miracles everywhere. Churches, herbalists, therapists. She drank bitter herbs, strange concoctions, prayed night and day, but nothing worked. Her womb was gone. The more her hope failed, the more her hatred for Kosy grew. Kennedy never suspected anything, but he began to notice changes in Kosy. Her silence, her sadness, her sudden weight loss. She was no longer the lively child she once was. He tried to talk to her one evening, asking her what was wrong, but Kosy was too scared to speak. Her mother's threats rang louder in her mind. Then one morning, Kennedy was running late for work. He rushed out of the house, forgetting the company's project proposal. Halfway the road, he remembered. With a sharp turn, he sped back home. The house was quiet when he entered. The school bus had already come and gone. He assumed that his daughters were in school. He hurried upstairs, grabbed the file from the drawer, and rushed downstairs. But as he neared the front door, he heard a faint cry, a soft trembling voice from behind the house. Then an angry yelling followed. It was Maria's voice. His brows furrowed. He wondered who Maria was yelling at. He walked toward the back door, and the sight in front of him froze him in place. There was Kosy, not in her uniform but in a faded house dress, her small hands buried in a basin of water as she washed a mountain of clothes, tears rolling down her cheeks. Beside her stood Maria, cane in her hand as she shouted angrily, telling Kosy to hurry up with the washing. Kennedy stood confused, shocked by what he just saw. "What is going on here?" he asked, confused. Maria's eyes widened. She froze and dropped the cane immediately. She had been caught. Kennedy turned to Kosy. "Why are you washing instead of being in school?" Kosy opened her mouth, but no words came out. Fear sealed her lips. Kennedy turned his eyes back and forth between his wife and his daughter, the pieces clicking together in his mind. It all made sense now. Her daughter's silence, her sadness, her weight loss were all caused by her own mother, who was supposed to be protecting her. "Kosy, go inside. I want to talk to your mother," Kennedy said firmly to Kosy, and she obeyed immediately. He turned to Maria, his face full of disappointment. "How could you be capable of such evil act?" he asked. But Maria showed no remorse. "It's all her fault. She didn't just make me lose my son. She destroyed my womb. She destroyed my life, and you think I'll let her live a happy life?" Kennedy was shocked by the words that came out from Maria's mouth. He tried reminding her that Kosy was still her daughter, but Maria thundered. "She's not my daughter. Not anymore. I disowned her a long time ago. I disowned her the very moment she killed my son. She's evil." Kennedy took a step backward, confused. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Maybe if you had closed the vegetable oil properly or gotten the water yourself, none of this would have happened." But Maria was too angry, saying she would never forgive Kosy. Kennedy stared at her like she was a stranger. This wasn't the woman he married. This wasn't the loving wife he once knew. She had become someone else. Without another word, he went inside, dressed Kosy in her uniform, and drove her to school. Even though he was already late for work, he didn't mind. He couldn't leave Kosy alone with Maria, not even for a second. Kosy sat quietly in the car, fighting back her tears. She didn't want her parents to argue because of her. She didn't want to cause problems anymore. She just wished for her mother to love her again. Kennedy couldn't concentrate at work after dropping Kosy off. His mind replayed Maria's angry face, her words, her bitterness. Was it grief, or had this darkness always been inside her? That day, he made a hard decision. He would send Kosy to a boarding school, far from Maria, far from the daily torture. Kosy deserved peace, and he couldn't always be there for her. He would send her to a safe place where she wouldn't walk on eggshells anymore. The house grew colder after that day. Kennedy stopped talking to Maria unless it involved the children. They no longer shared the same bed, no longer shared jokes, no longer prayed together or even eat together. They lived like strangers in the same house. Maria didn't care. To her, nothing mattered anymore. Her womb was gone. Her son was gone, and no man could give her that again, not even Kennedy. She had lost what she could never get, and there was no need for intimacy. At boarding school, Kosy was a shadow of herself. She walked quietly, kept to herself, never smiled. She barely spoke to her classmates, and no one knew the pain she was carrying inside her heart. Her teachers noticed she wasn't concentrating. Her eyes were always distant, her answers slow, her books messy. When asked to read, she stuttered and blacked out. Some students took advantage of her quietness and began to bully her. They mocked her in silence, pushed her around, and sent her on errands. Kosy did everything they wanted. She believed if she disobeyed them, they would beat her up like her mother always did. Her test scores were poor. Her reading skills declined. She was always lost in thought, mostly wondering when her mother would ever love her again. Would she ever love her again and smile at her like she did with her sisters? Or had she lost her mother forever? During school holidays, when she returned home, things got worse. Her father tried to help her. He encouraged her, told her to believe in herself, told her she could still do well in school. But her mother crushed those efforts daily. Maria insulted her, mocked her result, compared her to her younger sisters, and shouted at her to be more useful. Sometimes, Kosy always wished the holidays would end before it even started. She didn't feel safe at home and didn't feel safe at school either. She was trapped between two worlds that both hurt her. Worse still, Maria had poisoned the hearts of her younger daughters. Ava and Oma had started calling Kosy names too. They disrespected her, mocked her failures, and laughed at her while their mother watched in silence, or worse, smiled in agreement. She never allowed Kosy to defend herself. One day at school, Sandra, Kosy's classmate, who has been watching her from a distance, approached her, asking her why she was always alone, but Kosy said nothing. Sandra didn't give up. She showed her kindness, worked with her during break periods and talked about silly things just to make her laugh. Eventually, Kosy started responding. Just a little smile here and a quiet nod there. When the term was coming to an end, everybody was excited to go home, including Sandra, but Kosy wasn't. Sandra noticed her mood. What's wrong? Aren't you excited to go home? She asked. Kosy stayed silent, but Sandra didn't let go. After many gentle attempts, Kosy finally broke. Her words were shaky, tears rolling down her cheeks. She told Sandra everything. About her mother, about the beatings, about the hatred. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but she let it all out. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Kosy tightly. It's not your fault, she whispered. None of it is your fault. Life just happened, but you are not to be blamed. For the first time in years, Kosy felt seen. She felt heard. She felt loved. On the last day of school, as they hugged goodbye, Sandra smiled. We'll meet again next term, okay? Kosy nodded, her smile brighter than ever before. She knew what was waiting at home: more pain, more insults, more torture from the people who were supposed to love her. But this time, she didn't feel completely alone. She had told someone. She had a friend now. As the two girls waved goodbye, they didn't know it wasn't just a goodbye. It was their last goodbye. The journey from school was long and silent. Deep down, Kosy hoped things would be better this time. She prayed her mother had changed even a little. She hoped her sisters would treat her like a family again. But the moment she stepped through the door, she felt the same cold air. Her father was the only one who smiled warmly and hugged her tightly. Her sisters only put on fake smiles. They hugged her, but their eyes told a different story. Their voices were cold underneath their sweet words. The moment their father wasn't watching, they whispered rude things to her and rolled their eyes. Their mother, Maria, didn't even pretend. She hissed so loud and walked away, acting like Kosy didn't even exist. Kosy sat quietly, forcing a smile as her father tried to make everyone sit and talk like a family again, but she already knew nothing had changed. A few days later, Kennedy caught Ava and Oma laughing loudly at Kosy in the living room. They were mocking her result and calling her names. Look at this dummy who always comes last in class, Ava laughed. You should just drop out already and stop wasting school fees, Oma added, and they both laughed. Kosy stood there, quiet, hugging herself without saying a word. Kennedy stepped into the living room with disappointment all over his face. Ava and Oma froze. They didn't expect their father to be home at that time. Both of you have joined your mother in hurting your sisters. You both should be ashamed of yourself, Kennedy said, angry and disappointed. He walked over to Kosy, encouraged her to be strong, that she was the oldest and shouldn't let her younger sisters bully her. But it pained him deeply to say those words, knowing Kosy had already been broken many times. That evening, Kosy was in the kitchen, quietly washing the dishes after dinner. The clinking of plates and the sound of running water were the only sounds. Her thoughts drifted as they often did. into silence. Suddenly, her mother walked into the kitchen. Kosy tensed up immediately. She didn't look back. She kept washing, hoping her mother would walk past, but she didn't. Instead, she stood behind her and began to speak. She didn't raise her voice, but every word was sharp like blade. She mocked Kosy for her results again. She reminded her how Ava came first in her class and Oma came second. She called her a disgrace and said her father was foolish for still caring about her. She told her if it were up to her, Kosy would be hawking on the streets, not wasting money on school fees. She told her she was lucky to have someone like her father, or she would have made sure she suffered. Kosy just stood, her hands shaking in the soap water. Tears flowed silently down her cheeks. Her eyes blurred, but she kept scrubbing a plate, as if not hearing would protect her. What Kosy didn't know was that her father had heard everything. Kennedy had seen Maria walk into the kitchen earlier and had quietly followed. He knew Kosy wasn't there, and something in his heart told him to check. He stood by the door, hidden in the shadows, and listened. Each word from Maria stabbed him in his chest. He saw the monster his wife had become. Tears filled his eyes. He couldn't believe this was the same woman who cried tears of joy when Kosy was born, who used to sing lullabies at night. He stepped forward quietly. Maria turned. She saw him. There was no guilt in her eyes. No shock, no apology. She simply hissed and walked past him like nothing happened. Kennedy walked to Kosy and gently touched her back. She turned around and collapsed into his arms, crying. He held her, his chest heavy with pain. That night, Kosy sat alone in her bathroom, her tiny shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She had held in the pain for too long. She was tired of being hated, tired of being hurt, tired of pretending everything was fine. She was tired of living. She slowly reached for a bottle of hypo-bleach tucked behind the bathroom bucket. Without thinking much, she opened it and drank some, hoping the pain would end. As the burning liquid hit her throat, her legs gave way and she crashed to the floor, foaming from the mouth. Upstairs, Kennedy sat in his room, lost in deep thoughts. His heart ached for Kosy. He had thought sending her to a boarding school would give her peace, but it wasn't enough. First, it was his younger daughters bullying Kosy, and now, it was Maria. That kitchen incident had opened his eyes. He knew he had to act fast. He couldn't leave Kosy in that house anymore. He would send Kosy abroad to live with his elder brother. It was time she experienced true peace, far away from pain. He stood up and went straight to Kosy's room to tell her the plan. He knocked gently on her door. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time, but there was no answer. He opened the door slowly, but the room was empty. He stood confused, wondering where Kosy was. Then he heard a strange muffled sound coming from the bathroom. He rushed to the door and opened it. His heart nearly stopped. Kosy lay on the floor, twitching, foam coming out of her mouth. He screamed her name loudly, and without wasting a second, he carried her up, rushed down the stairs to his car, and drove her to the hospital. Maria stood outside, frozen in shock. Ava, Oma, and Marvella stood beside her, confused and shocked. At the hospital, the doctors acted fast, fighting so hard to save Kosy's life. After what felt like hours, one of them came out and said, "We were able to save her. If you came even a few minutes late, we would have lost her." Kennedy closed his eyes in relief, but his heart was broken. He didn't go home that night. He stayed by Kosy's side all night, watching her pale face as machines beeped softly beside her. She looked so small, so fragile. She had suffered too much for someone so young. At home, Maria sat in the living room, not sad that Kosy almost died, but scared. Scared that Kennedy knew how she frustrated Kosy. And now that Kosy had tried to take her own life, everything was falling apart. She knew it was over. The next morning, Kennedy returned home. His eyes were tired, his face blank. Maria stood up quickly when he entered. Ava and Oma stood beside her, quiet and tense. Without a word, Kennedy placed divorce papers on the table. He had made up his mind. He told Maria the marriage was over. He was done trying, done hoping she would change. Maria's knees buckled. She fell to the floor crying. She begged, but Kennedy didn't take back his words. She had gone too far. He didn't want to press charges. He just wanted her out for good. He turned to Ava and Oma, his eyes sharp. You two joined your mother in hurting your sister. You were supposed to love her, not destroy her. I'm so disappointed in the both of you. You almost made me lose Kosy, but God saved her. If you want to go with your mother, you're free to do so, Kennedy said. Then he turned and left the house. Maria's sobs echoed through the house. She had never seen Kennedy so hurt. She knew she had to leave before things got worse. Through her tears, she signed the divorce papers, walked to her room, and packed her bags slowly. When she came out, dragging her bags, she saw Ava and Oma still sitting in the living room. Why haven't you packed your bags yet? Aren't you coming with me? She asked. But the girls looked at her coldly. You made us hate our own sister. You deceived us. You turned us into something we're not, Ava thundered. You lied to us. We're not coming with you, Oma added. Maria froze. Their words cut deep. Her daughters were rejecting her. She lowered her head in shame and walked out of the house alone. She went to her sister's house to stay, and soon the news of her actions spread. People looked at her differently. Her club members blamed her. Neighbors avoided her. Others shook their heads when her name was mentioned. She couldn't stop crying. She couldn't stop regretting. She had destroyed her family with her own hands. Back at home, Ava and Oma cried and begged Kosy for forgiveness when she returned from the hospital. They told her how sorry they were. Kosy, though still healing, forgave them. She had suffered too much to hold on to hate. Kennedy didn't wait long. Within a month, he completed the papers to send Kosy abroad. He didn't want to take chances. Even though Maria was gone, he wanted Kosy far away from that house. Kosy was sent to live with his uncle and family in the United Kingdom, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt peace. She was treated like family, loved, protected, and supported. She smiled again. She laughed again. She slept without fear. Ava and Oma couldn't stop missing Kosy, and they never stopped blaming their mother for what happened. Even when she called and begged them to visit her, they refused. But Kennedy, ever the gentle father, reminded them, she's still your mother. Forgive her. Don't let hate grow in your heart. Eventually they listened, but they never saw her the same way again. And Maria, she lived every day with the weight of regret. Her marriage was gone. Her daughters were distant. When she asked to see Kosy and ask for forgiveness, Kennedy refused, saying he would never allow her go close to Kosy. The daughter she hated most was now the one she could never reach. Maria hated herself. She had thrown away the love of her family, all because of her obsession for a son. But Kosy, she blossomed. She grew stronger. She improved massively in school. She found peace. And finally, she was happy. Her story didn't end in pain. It began a new chapter of joy. A new life full of hope. Children are blessings, regardless of the gender. Parents should love all their children equally and never let bitterness or favoritism destroy their home. Favoritism and harsh words can destroy a child's spirit. Parents, never burden your children with your frustrations because the emotional wounds can be more painful than physical ones. Children carry the weight of how they are treated, and even small acts of love or cruelty can shape their future. Regret often comes too late, so we must value and protect our loved ones while we still can. No matter the pain of the past, healing and peace are always possible if we choose love.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to Hopela Stories.